Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. If you believe in something, you need to have the courage to fight for those ideas, not run away from them or try to silence them. Charlie Kirk. Today, we give tribute to Charlie with a friend, a longtime friend of the Culture Matters podcast, founder, mentor, leader, fighter for truth, the one and only author, of course, Christine Beckwith. Charlie was a father of two, 31 years old, opened up hundreds of chapters for young adults to fight for truth through dialogue, discourse, open conversation. His father was an architect, his mother, a trader turned mental health professional. He took a gap year that turned into 13 years and a massive organization, a mission in our culture, and was assassinated September 10th. Christine, thanks for coming on to share some
Absolutely.
thoughts about Charlie and what he represented to us.
Yeah, it's been a really heavy moving week. Um, I was working. I was obviously, I knew Charlie Kirk. I would be lying if I told you that I could have ever quoted, exactly the things that he stood for, but I knew that he was pivotal in the youth movement of getting them to have dialogue. I knew that he was touring colleges. I did not know, and I found out within minutes of his death, unfortunately, my son, my 19-year-old son Jagger, who is away at college right now, texted me and his father and his stepdad Corey, his father Jason, and said, "Oh my God, Charlie Kirk just got shot at a college campus." And he was completely shook. And so obviously we turned on our TVs, and at that time also we went to our phones, and not to sound too graphic, but the videos of what had just happened were there. They weren't yet censored and pulled down. And so unfortunately I did see the shocking assassination almost in real time, like, within a 30-minute window. And we were watching on TV live as we were waiting to hear. And anyone that saw it knew that he had sustained like you know, ending, a life-ending shot. But I think getting on the phone with my son was emotional. And my son is not a dramatic kid. He's not sensationalized by things. I would even argue that he's probably desensitized because of growing up in this world. I can vividly remember one morning, not to go down a rabbit hole, but when he was probably 8 or 9 years old, I don't know if you remember the club shooting that occurred in Florida that killed like 50 people, the mass shooting. And back then, unfortunately, comparing it to
Yeah.
today, mass shootings were not happening every day in America. And it was more rare. Not that it's more or less important on the frequency of the lives of the people that were impacted, but I had been getting ready to bring him to school. He was ready. He had his backpack on. And I came downstairs, and I always had the news running because I was always up ahead of him. And I walked into the living room, and he was sitting on the edge of the couch, and he was just glued to the news story of this mass shooting. And I felt horrible that I'd left the news on in light of the story because of his young age. And I said, "Jagger, it's time, to go." And he turned around and he said, "Mom, why would anyone do that?" And I said, "Hate, ignorance, you know." Um, sickness, illness, someone that's not right, someone that, has evil, unfortunately, in their heart. And so Jagger's grown up in this world. It's sad. He's my only child, but on the phone with him that day, he said, I know that when he was voting at 18, it was his first election, of course, and his father and I are both political, but when I say political, we're both very involved, with, watching and getting self-educated when it's time for elections on the politicians and the campaigns and all that. So he's grown up in that. And with no influence or preaching on our part, just, total open mind. In fact, he's an independent. Jagger's an independent. He declared his independence. He felt that and we appreciated this. He felt like he doesn't know. How do you know at 18, what party affiliation you're going to go with? And so he said that he started to listen to things online, and that's when he found Charlie Kirk. And he said what was different for him was how he spoke to young people, whether they were adverse to him questioning his position or in line with his thinking. And Jagger went to Catholic school. And even though Charlie Kirk is a Christian, he had a religious upbringing. And then as Jagger got older, not to give too much away about my son, he questioned some of those things about religion. And so he was in a really, like I think most young men in the world and young people, in a place where he wanted to be educated in his vote. And for him, Charlie Kirk helped him make that decision. He felt like it was the right decision based on how he expressed what that party stood for, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for me, for the last week, I've been afraid of the backlash at colleges. There was a vigil at Jaggers College. Of course, the youth came out to honor, and so did the whole world, but especially the youth. And Jagger wanted to go to the vigil, and yet he was a little nervous to go. Like he didn't know what he was going to face. He was also really emotional the first 2 days when he was seeing the first of the hate language on social media. In fact, he called and said, I just had a debate with this person online. I can't believe the horrific things that they said and no value of life and da 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 da. And I said, Jagger, my advice to you is to not do that. I think you just, if they're your friends, you can unfriend them, you can block them, you can, get it out of your space, or don't go to the places you're going to see that. I think you're going to see more of that. And it's been eye-opening. It's been eye-opening for me. I think I've unfriended 8 people this week, and not because they're not my friends, still to this day, but because I am very aligned in my mind with what my own integrity stands for. And because of that, I don't want to see the things that make me feel sick or sad or angry or any of those things. And so I spent a lot of time listening to Charlie Kirk's videos, the whole ceremony that was done this weekend. I watched every bit of it end to end, and I was completely moved. I'm a Christian Baptist. And I think the most profound impact that I can say I'm having or receiving from Charlie Kirk's life is that I feel a little ashamed that I've been more quiet about my faith. Because when you see somebody, the thing about truth, and I write about it all the time. I did 2 posts today, and one of them was about being a writer and how our words become our legacy, and how the world wants us to be quieter, smaller, and that in my lifetime I've written in rebellion of that because I have something to say, and not because I thought my story was special, but because I thought by writing my story, it would tell the world that everyone should write their story, that everybody should tell their story, like as an example. I don't think my story is special, but I think when we listen to each other's truths, and I wrote a whole book about the truth, Finding Honor, the Journey to the Truth, that you well know, that I've written a lot about you within that book. And the thing about Charlie is He was honest. And when you witness raw honesty, I don't care what they stand for. I'll equate this to like sometimes watching sports. You know, what comes to mind is a moment when Derek Jeter was in Boston and he happened to be doing his last game for the New York Yankees, and they were our rivals. We had all kinds of negative chants for the New York Yankees, and we love to hate them. Hate being a loose word for sports, but you know what I mean. We love to rival them. But there was something so passionate when you would watch Derek Jeter play that you could not help but have admiration for that passion. It didn't matter the color of his uniform. And so you would see it and you cheer against it when he would do well. But I witnessed something that was so moving because when he stepped up to the Red Sox plate for the very last time, what would be known in his career as the last time, every single person in Boston stood. And the applause went on forever and ever. And those moments remind me of what I witnessed Sunday. The
Mm.
powerful words of the people that came forward to honor Charlie. I could quote some of the things that the different speakers said that really stood out, but I'll stop because I know you're interviewing me and I don't want to go on and on, but this has been a big week, you know, and Charlie Kirk is the reason.
You've been a leader of leaders, worked in companies all, throughout a broad tenure with tremendous depth. Can you unpack a little bit about leadership here and
Mhm.
how someone that stands on their convictions impacts a company, impacts a culture, impacts a team? And are there lessons that we could garner from this cultural
Mhm.
leader that
Yeah.
transcend politics, transcend the surface level disagreements?
To me, well, for one, I'm going to say this to everybody that might hear this broadcast. If you are leading people anywhere in your life, and this can be as parents with your family or it can be at work, our world needs leadership right now. And this isn't me talking about choosing a political side. This is about us really helping raise up a world that's in turmoil right now. Our world is in turmoil. You know, we're at war within our own society in so many different ways. And to me, when I hear the stories, when I heard the story of one of the chapter leaders who got up during the ceremony, and I forget her name, unfortunately, Dunn, I believe is her last name. But she said, she opened and she said that Charlie was supposed to be memorializing and ministering at her husband's funeral, but instead she was at Charlie's funeral. Um, and she told the story about a young Charlie at 17 years old when he started Turning Point and wanting to build new chapters. And he went and pitched at 17 there, opening a chapter, and he asked for $50,000. And she said, if you raise the first half, we'll write the second half.
Huh.
She said 3 days later, he called her and he said, I've got the $25,000, 17 years old. And she matched that, but she would go on to say how many chapters they opened. And every time she did something called, a match, a challenge, and it would raise into the millions of dollars. They would open huge, huge ministries under Turning Point, and she would say, "You raise a million, we'll raise a million." As he got older, and we know he died, at 31. So this is a kid who believes so passionately in a cause and gets that passion is contagious. Honesty is contagious. Authenticity is contagious. You show me someone that riles you up because of their honesty, even when you don't agree with them, there's still a level of respect there. because of how passionate they are about a cause or whatever they're doing. And the word leadership just came over and over and over. You know, he took a lot of crap because he didn't go finish college. The One of his teachers spoke at the ceremony and said that he had taken some courses, um, and that he didn't finish college, but he was one of the most profound students and had the biggest impact on the world with what he did with his life. Ben Carson got up and he quoted a politician, nameless politician, that had called him ignorant, and he defended that Charlie, could run circles around people that had college educations. And he talked about the reason that Charlie was wise and had the impact that he had was because of his belief system. When he studied the US history and he went out on the campaign trail, he was quoting how many people that signed the Constitution were Christians. And he tied everything that he did into the belief that our country was built by Christian leaders and that it was God's creation that we're supposed to live by, the rules of God, and that those rules are sewn into our prophecy through our Constitution, and that the evil that has come into the world has tried to eradicate and separate church from government, obviously through the diversity and the evolution of our country. And Charlie was fearless. He really believed in the fact that the youth needed leadership that would give true historical lessons about Christianity and how our country was created and the tie between the two. Because he would point to the fact that the media, Hollywood, educators had decided to follow a different system that would eradicate those things. And those are the biggest places that our kids are impacted. So it was Charlie's feeling that until we lead our youth again to the place where we can teach how our country was built, and we're not relying on people that showed up here 30 years ago, we're relying on people that can talk about how this country was created and protect how it was created. And so he talked about something that was profound for me was he talked about temptation. Charlie did. And he said to young men, I saw a video clip and he was like, "You're going to be tempted." He goes, "We can't stop ourselves from temptation. It's everywhere. It's going to be there." And he said, our ability to fight that and do right and do good is one of the things that are going to make us have the highest confidence, highest self-respect, et cetera, et cetera. And I just feel like this kid lived 1,000 lives to 31 years old. I'm 24, 25 years older than him. He could be my son. I mean, really, I could have had him at
Mm.
20, 25 years old, 26 years old. He'd be 31. And I felt like I betrayed my own Christianity listening to his pride in Christianity. Because the truth is, and as I have written in Finding Honor, The Journey to the Truth, I open in the opening chapter that we all pray to an almighty God. There is a spirit in us that draws us to do good. And we are in a battle our whole lives to get honest with ourselves, to be honest people. And it doesn't matter to me who your God is. We know there's a greater power. Another thing I'll say is that I saw a video clip of a young man that was very polite, but he went to the microphone and he said, "I don't believe in God. I want you to prove to me there's a God," he said to Charlie. And Charlie said, "Are you atheist or agnostic?" And he said he was atheist. And he said, well, then I would like you to convince me that there isn't one. He said, because if you believe that everything we see in this world and our creation, our mechanics, everything we see was not created by an almighty creator, then you convince me. And if you can convince me there isn't a God. So it was just a powerful moment. And the kid kind of laughed and they went down this dialogue. I think you represent this. I don't need to stroke you in any way, shape, or form on these podcasts, but one of the things I'm most proud about in my life is my alignment with people that I think are like me. And I know our story is written in a book. And in my opinion, you have taught me the greatest life lessons, and I will argue business lessons too, because of your insight. Everybody needs somebody else that can look at them because we have blind spots and we cannot see, and we're emotional. And so we cannot make objective decisions for ourselves. You need someone you can trust with that, not someone that's self-serving. You need somebody that understands your mission, not their own. And the thing about you, in my mind, was your honesty, your brutal honesty, your passion, same as Charlie Kirk. I think I'm like that. I've been taking sales calls lately and I haven't done that for years. But my company's smaller. I have time. And the truth is I really enjoy it. I mean, I just wrote a book about selling. It's what I love. It's my passion. And I discover when I start talking about education and professional development and people submitting themselves to change and evolution, I understand they're placing a power in and trust in me. And so even though I don't know Charlie Kirk, I can tell you he's changed my life. He's changed my son's life. I know from this day forward, I will talk more about God in my day to day. I know I will revisit my faith. I have prayed more in the last week, and I've been praying a lot. I always pray. I pray every day. But I have been praying more than I have ever
Mm.
prayed in the last week. And it's almost like I feel sorry that I haven't been because I know that that power given to God, like I caught myself thinking about how Erica Kirk said, "You're never alone because God is with you." And during some dark times in the last few years, I felt very lonely. And I think I said to a few people, I feel alone. And I realize now it's because I forgot in those moments that I wasn't alone. And so now all of a sudden, all this loneliness I've been carrying because of my sister being gone, when people are in your life in close proximity and they leave, it's very inexplicable. It's a very hard thing to describe, but there's a loneliness left in that. There's a feeling of something being missing, and it never goes away, by the way. Like it just is there. It's a missing piece of your life, and it impacts you. And so all of a sudden, I feel more fulfilled. I feel closer to my sister this week than I have in a long time. I feel like I've been on this grief journey, getting over the grief, and you feel guilty when you get over grief, when your grief starts to subside, because it's the last thing you have that connects you to the person that you love. It's the last tie between you and them. And there's guilt that comes with it. Everybody that goes through massive grief says it. And so I've been welcoming the next evolution, of whatever the grief is going to bring me, the next stage of it as I've gone through it. And I'm really, for the first time this week, I feel closer to her than I have felt. And I'm talking to her again in my mind. And I feel like I haven't been for a while. So I would
Oh,
say it's a pretty big impact. Like I'm listening. I've always listened to learn. This morning, I woke up at 4 and I couldn't go to sleep. And I enjoyed the speeches that the people gave so much in that ceremony the other day. I sat by myself in the dark in this house and I spent 2 hours re-listening because they were that moving to me. There were
wow.
things I heard that I didn't hear the first time. And it felt like going to church for me.
And this can be seen on YouTube, the
Yeah, the
ceremonies. Yeah,
whole, yep.
I want to watch. For our listeners that haven't seen that, Sunday memorial to Charlie. I recommend you go listen to that. I want to share the definition of passion because you said, passions come up quite a bit in this series.
Yeah.
It's what I love. It's my passion. Um, and you talked about his honesty, his passion, authenticity. Passion, a strong, intense emotion or compelling enthusiasm toward an object, idea, activity, or person. Often implies both suffering from its root meaning and devotion. Um, it comes from passio in Latin, suffering, enduring. Originally referred to the passion of the Christ, his suffering. Over time, the meaning shifted towards intense emotion, strong desire, or driving enthusiasm. The willingness to suffer for what one loves. Passion is what gives life meaning, separating an authentic life from an indifferent one. That's from Soren Kierkegaard, I've been thinking a
Oh
lot
my God,
about
would you say
Soren.
that quote? Ugh, the quote that you said, that you sent to me the day Charlie died or the day after. Then I heard it on a podcast that you were quoted on. And then I heard it at the ceremony on Sunday, and I thought, say the quote.
Yeah, Soren Kierkegaard. I sent that to Patrick, and I think he influenced. I think somehow that influenced the chief strategy officer because it's the perfect quote. Soren Kierkegaard, for those that aren't familiar, the father of existentialism. He was he's like the theologian's theologian, an unbelievable thinker. I've been obsessed with for years. He said, when the tyrant dies, his rule is over. And when the martyr dies, his reign begins. I've always looked at that quote as within the business context, an alliteration
Mm-hmm.
on leadership by example, like responsibility
Yeah.
is modeled.
Yeah.
We right Maxwell's law of the picture. We see the leader modeling, acting it out, carrying that burden, versus the tyrant using everything other than showing the way or actions, speech, rhetoric, ideology. Like that's how I've always looked at that quote.
Yeah.
And I think of Charlie's example, and I want your opinion on this from someone that's taken businesses from losing to winning, teams from being the worst to first, like Gordon Bethune did with some airline 50 years ago. I read some random book. Gordon Bethune is called First. Uh, uh, it was Worst to First. That was the title of the book. Anyway, um, famous CEO of an airline. Charlie went to these universities. He went there himself and he had the conversations. When I think of that example in business, I think of what you said. It's what I love. It's my passion, having the conversation.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I, yeah, so I want to talk about sales and leadership and sales. Charlie went to these universities and he had the conversations. He was selling. He was high selling. I swear, everybody, Christine didn't tell me to pitch the book. She didn't tell me to pitch the book, but he was high selling for
He
since 17 years
demonstrated
old.
the top 10 traits that I have in the book, and I'm not going to rattle them
And
off, but
he impacted the culture of the Western society, our Western
civilization,
civilization. Yeah, so like
100%.
this is a big deal, everybody. Culture matters. It's a
And
big
he's
deal.
going to be more famous, more remembered, more quoted for hundreds of years from now because you can't look at a life in its totality, and it never happens until someone perishes. And then people come out and say, this is the impact, this is the impact. It was not lost on me. It was so moving. The amount, 100 million people were streaming in this world, not in our country, in the world. 31-year-old guy.
Wow.
100 million, they said, streaming, watching that. And to me, if 100 million people aren't watching Sunday football
Mm,
and 100,000 people are in a stadium at the exact time that our favorite sport is on in America, which I would say there's few things that anybody's getting on the television on a Sunday afternoon in the United States during football season. I know that when I saw his leaders get up
mm,
and speak about him, they talked about the fact that they said such poignant things. One young man said that Charlie said, "Come work for me, don't finish college." And he didn't. He
wow.
stopped college, he went to work for him, opened a ministry, and he met his wife day three, I guess, of his employment there. She was up on stage with him. He talked, he's so young, this kid was in his 20s, and he just talked about the impact that living, a good life and living an honorable life and living in honesty and having a set of ethical, codes that we live by, which is what I talk about in Finding Honor, like a code that I live by, a code that I think is intertwined in our souls inside of us. Um, Charlie wanted ministries to be
Mm,
opened. He was out there spreading the word. But the funny part about that is that, first of all, you got to get people to hear you. People will see you, but they won't hear you, even when you're talking a lot of times. They've got to be moved to the point, and clearly this country was moved because as this man perishes, countries came out. Countries. He went over to South Korea because the Christians there are being tortured for they're being asked not to be public with their Christianity. And they did a daring thing, and he went to a daring place and told them to be proud of their Christianity. When he died, they had memorials, flowers upon flowers. There were hundreds of thousands of South Koreans watching the streaming on Sunday. To me, Charlie had a product that was Turning Point USA. He had a company, a legitimate company. The product, his product was his faith in God. He was asked, "What do you want to be remembered by?" He said his faith. And I think when I think about walking away from the money that I was making and dedicating my life to, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Charlie Kirk right now, I promise you. But it's similar in my thinking because a lot of people question my business sense of starting from scratch, a startup company in a saturated world of coaching where you can't cut through the noise and there's so many voices of people coaching. But I knew the one thing I'm confident about myself, and I have a ton of insecurities, trust me. But the one thing I knew to be my truth is that I come from a God honest, good place to help other people. And I'm passionate about my belief in my skill set of my education, my self education, also of what I've learned in this lifetime and in the business that I'm in. And so all the odds that were stacked against me, I had a naive, surmountable attitude that that was nothing that was going to stop me because the truth was I'd already lived an entire lifetime of overcoming statistical obstacles that couldn't be overcome by ignoring them. I have a quote in Wise Eyes that says, "We need to be ignorant in some ways to succeed because people are going to come and tell you why you can't do things." And so
mm,
Charlie had that naive, someone said it, that naive belief that he could convince people to go back to God or to join God. His pastor, who stood up, said, "I feel like at some point Charlie was bigger than me." He called me America's pastor. He goes, and I said, I'm not America's pastor. You're America's pastor. And he said, no,
Huh.
no, you're America's pastor. And he goes, you know, he said, for the next 10 minutes, Charlie's tent that says prove me wrong. Well, he's winning because of his death. He was standing there as America's pastor. And I think in that honest moment, he asked people that had lost their faith or had never committed to God to stand, which is hard, because that's a personal choice and you're in front of hundreds of people in that auditorium and yet thousands of people stood. Because what happens when you sit with somebody that's really brutally honest,
Wow.
they crack the code between you and them. You and I did this for hours upon hours when we would sit at Fleming's in Jersey, when a decade ago or more. And we would just talk philosophically about our truths and our honesties. We weren't there with titles. We weren't there with bank statements. We weren't there with egos. We were there as two human beings with a passion for life and looking for the way forward and having things that we could give to each other. And there's no question we are a living example of what can be done when two people that can trust each other come together for the better good of each other. You live in that in what you do. I live in that in what I do. And so I probably don't have the best marketing of all the coaches that are out there. I know there's people that are more advanced than me in how they reach people. And sometimes I think if I could just get heard or seen more, I think I do better than a lot of my counterparts because I know my passion is greater and more honest. And my product is to increase profitability, to make sound business people, to educate business people, to create better leaders. And I have a skill set that's specific to the mortgage industry and 32 years of in the trenches experience. And there isn't a conversation I can't have about guidelines or DTIs or LTVs or regulations or compliance or any of the things that would be considered the toolbox of our industry. But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that all the success I had, which is what I wrote in High, did not come from just teaching them how to wield their swords, but it taught them how to fight for their lives while wielding their swords. Because what gets in the way of all of our success is typically in our heads. It's
Mm.
typically our mindset. It's typically something that's throwing us off or taking us down. And none of us are going to get through this life without life altering impacts. We're going to have deaths of loved ones around us. We're going to get sick. People are going to get sick around us. We're going to have job loss. We're going to have relationship loss. We're going to hurt. We're going to bleed. And yet, if we understand that every single day we've got to wake up and we've got to choose the people we sit next to. I know that more today at 55, almost 56 years old than I've ever known. There are people that are not at my table by choice, and I'm better for it. And I see the people I want here, and they raise me up. And they may not have the experience I have. I can't tell you how many coaching calls I do where I'm there guiding another person, and in that phone call, I am lifted. I'm lifted by their honesty. I'm lifted by their passion. I'm lifted by their authenticity when they open up. And I think I bring that out of people because that's how I come. It's taken me a really long time to live with the criticism of my honesty because sometimes I say hard things to people that aren't ready to hear them. Sometimes I say things that are controversial, but they are my truth. And finally in my lifetime, I can stand behind the things I have said. There was many decades when I thought it wasn't popular, something I had said, I would backpedal to make good. And today, I don't say it unless I mean it. And if I said it, I'll cop to it and I'll deal with the conflict, right? You taught me that, lean into the conflict, because I think there's beauty in that. And so I think Charlie spent his life leaning into the conflict. I think he went straight in and grabbed the bull's horns. And he wasn't afraid of the conflict. He knew that on the other side of that debate, he there was a resolution, and he might not convince the other person. He might not win them over, but he knew he would be heard with his passion. And
Mm,
now that he's gone, what I saw and what I think is most profound is that people are hearing him now in hindsight. The lessons he's giving are even greater now in hindsight. And so I don't understand where we're going as a world right now, but I know there are people in this world that want to make it better. I want to be aligned with those people. That
this,
passion, that honesty.
I, I think it was said he did 250, at least 250 talks here, 200 campuses, 1,000 churches. I don't know if that was in a year or if that was his tenure. Either one is crazy. And I wanted to say that I think what Charlie's done for us is he raised the bar.
100%. I want to be out more than I've ever been. I'm accepting more speaking opportunities than I've ever accepted. I'm in better physical shape to do so now, a couple of years past my deep grievance of my sister. And I know that's the way. I know if I'm heard, I'll have an impact. I do have a product to sell. I do have a business. I don't think there's shame in that. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, they're selling Turning Point Ministries. And I always get a kick out of people that turn something into pettiness when there's a movement, or they try to make you feel shame. I have spent years now trying to explain to the business person that gets called the opportunist that yes, yes, if you are good at seeing opportunity, that makes you a good business person. If you've got something that fixes another person's problems and you see an opportunity to bring what you do for financial gain to that person, we have to stop apologizing. That is other people around us saying, take your foot off the pedal
Mm,
and shaming us for our passion. I don't understand people that are deterred by it. I know it makes people uncomfortable when they're around somebody that's truly, truly honest and authentic. I've made people uncomfortable in my lifetime because I always have my foot on that pedal. But yes, I've realized recently I have been coasting for a really long time. I needed to coast at one point. I was pummeled by my sister's death and her untimely death, her tragic death, you know? And I have a greater understanding of my mortality. There's so many gifts that have come out of it, but in my pause, I can feel myself rising again. And
mm,
I have had inklings just in the last few weeks of this old self of myself. And it's a great version of me. It is a powerful version of me. It's a version that has me singing in the car with music alone. It's a version that has me reading more, writing more. It's a version of me that has me talking more, more energetic, more passion for life. I'm creating more. I'm spending more time in the broaden and build space. And I am inspired by Charlie Kirk. And I hope doing this tonight, and I'm not afraid to have this put out in my name because this isn't a political discussion. Not really. I understand there's a political affiliation. But I am not afraid to say that that man, his life mattered. His life had an impact. It's impacting me. I see it impacting other people around me. I think this is a pivotal moment. Ironically, I think it's a turning point. I do. And so maybe he was prophetic. You know, he literally died doing his passion
mm.
in in the process of doing it, speaking like he literally was in the throes of his passion when he died. And if we can be so lucky not to fade out in this world and to go out in that kind of way where your last act is an honest, passionate act, praise be to God, is what I would say. I hope that's how I hope I am in the same position. And I plan on staying as strong as I can, as long as I can, and doing this. I know in the days and weeks ahead, I will have more meaningful discussions with the people I coach. I will have more discussions with Christians. I will be more faithful to my God. And and I definitely feel like it's time for leadership to stand up. And I feel like I'm a strong leader in this world. And so I plan on doing more and better. He made us want to be a better person, better people.
Amen. If you're listening to this podcast, I challenge you to re-listen to it. If you haven't watched the memorial Christine was referencing, it's a YouTube click
Yep.
away. Christine, thank you for coming on and sharing your views and experience on Charlie. And we give tribute to this father, husband, founder, entrepreneur, just like we have great people every single day coming on to the Culture Matters podcast who led by example from the front. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. And please, if you're listening to this, share this
Thank you.
with somebody that you know needs to hear it. We will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.